Nicole Shanahan, thank you so much for joining us. It's AmFest. It's a crazy moment in our history, and history is being made.
Yeah, it's incredible to be here. I'm just so grateful.
So, there's so much to get into. I mean, I think that one of the biggest things for me is we saw the way this election played out. We saw the way that a handful of, let's face it, it's tech, it's mostly guys, took that one step in a scary direction to say, you know what, Donald Trump is the guy, and we're not going to listen to the people in charge of these established corporations, big tech, big pharma, big ag, all these guys. We're not going to take instructions from them anymore. We want to return freedom and opportunity to the people, and of course to ourselves. That moment was so big, and here's why. It's because, you know what, when you think about the whole concept of like change makers, change agents, innovative people, all of those forces that were arrayed against Donald Trump portrayed themselves that way. They wanted that branding. Mm-hmm. They wanted to say, we're the guys who are going to lead you into the next era of humanity. We're going to bring everyone together. We're going to empower you. We're going to celebrate you. And what we found out, especially over the course of the past couple of years, is that was all sort of like an elaborate propaganda campaign. And so it's great that now, our guys are stepping into that role and saying no, we can do this right. Yeah. But I do think that a lot of Americans, even though they're very excited about what's next, I think a lot of them are sort of still shell-shocked, and there's this trust deficit. They're very reluctant to sort of trust anyone who's at the top of the pack. So how do we restore that trust? And how do you think this sort of team of super friends that is making MAGA 2.0 happen? What steps do you think that they can take to really start to restore trust with the American people?
Yeah, I think about this transition team and how different it was from the 2016 transition team. Vastly different. I see all of these people making, the trips out to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Donald Trump. That did not happen in 2016. The people who were calling Trump and censoring him, calling him, a Nazi, censoring him, keeping him off any positive search results, making sure anytime media spoke of him, it was negative. I mean, they're trekking out. The Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, probably one of the meanest liberal news outlets out there. They had, just really sharp teeth this last, this election. And Jeff Bezos is, going out. It's like going to Mecca, right? And it's just being I'm really sorry, right? I mean, that's what it is.
Says that he wants conservative voices on the editorial page. How much do you think of that is real, and how much of that is just kind of you sort of bow to the king, and then 5 minutes later you start working against him?
Look, these business leaders and tech leaders, they didn't get to where they were by not being flexible with who is the status quo, right? And it really is, bending a knee to whomever you need to just grow your business. The thing is that there is something about the people around Trump that are different than what has become of the Democratic Party. And, someone said this to me, and I think it's kind of accurate. The vibe around Trump right now is kind of like the vibe of the Democratic Party as it was really coming up in the late 80s and early 90s. Yeah. There was this sense of professionalism, of virtue, of honesty, of transparency. I don't know if it was true at the time, but that was what the perception was. And sophistication and savvy, and kind of taking the latest and greatest of technology, and taking the latest and greatest of culture. Yeah. But that's left the Democratic Party because they've gotten so dark. Yeah. In so many ways, and anyone that's still grasping to those, Democratic Party virtues of, the 80s, 70s, 90s, they're not happy. They just don't know that they're ready to make the jump, because making the jump is kind of scary.
It is scary, but that's where transformation comes from. I mean, you look at what's going on the quote-unquote right now with technology, that's where all the momentum is. Politics, that's where all the momentum is. Culture, it's looking a little, no one has really figured out how to reconstitute a pop culture that is that has spirituality, that has vitality,
Yes.
that knows how to have fun, that doesn't sort of slip into the dark planet that that we've seen so much of established entertainment go into.
Yeah, and
do you
that's
feel
authentic?
Yes, and
from
that's
the
authentic.
individual.
Do you feel
Yeah.
hopeful about the future of pop culture in America?
I do, and I think independent media, independent music, social media, it's really giving birth to that and giving it like this great evergreen situation. So if you're a creator, an artist, or you want to try a new mixed medium, or you want to try something so radical and go no tech, but get out the result as like a video or whatever, like that's gonna make the rounds, because following the zeitgeist, it's very interesting right now because it's not it's not necessarily a manufactured zeitgeist. The Democratic Party aligned itself with the manufactured zeitgeist.
Yeah.
That was like the Hollywood, the music industry. That's all manufactured zeitgeist by corporatists. Then you have this organic zeitgeist. That's what you see on X. That's what you see here at AmFest. And when you follow that organic zeitgeist, it's like, it is, oh man, talk about like exalted emotions. It feels really great. And there's something intoxicating about it. And all these young people, they didn't have to necessarily leave an entrenched position with the Democratic Party. They just kind of woke up and they got drawn to it. And that's how you know it's good.
I think that generational change is so huge. I mean, we're actually starting to stack like younger generations now.
Yeah.
And for these kids, they're like, well, of course I voted for Trump. It's like, it's not a big deal. I mean, obviously it's important, but this is becoming sort of like an acceptable baseline. This is kind of where that trust begins to resurrect. When you have people who, they were tweens during COVID, or they were younger than that, and they saw, half their life, a quarter of their life just sort of zapped away by people with no accountability, people who pressured them to do things they knew that they didn't want to do. And now they're coming of age. They're becoming adults.
Yeah, they are. And I think that, I talk a lot about my concerns about biological health, right? Yeah. And I think as much as culture can start to understand how deeply connected, and I see signs of this, young people craving farmland is like a cool pop culture.
Yeah.
Like Ballerina Farms, I follow her. She's incredible, and I follow this woman also that will like cook these huge meals outside on a fire pit. And she'll like hang a roast and like show you what a slow roast used to look like.
I think the biggest app game right now is Farm Simulator.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so.
I didn't know that. I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So, I ask you this culture question, and I'll sort of answer my own question about trust, because I think these things are really interlinked. And my experience, I sort of go back to 2016 and even before that into the distant sort of foggy memory of the dark ages of the Obama administrations. And so many of those guys who were sort of first wave Trump guys were Californians. And so many...
this hat?
Yeah.
Made in California.
Yeah.
So we manufactured this at the OG MAGA hat factory in California.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So, I grew up in California, 20 years in and around LA.
Yeah.
So many of those 2016 guys were Californian guys who are like, look, we've seen the future and it sucks.
Yeah.
And you can trust us because we just lived through what they want to do to everyone. 2020, COVID, the vax mandates, the very first people who raised the red flag on that, at least, in my experience, were like crunchy ladies living in Topanga Canyon who are like, we need to say no to this, and I don't care like which friends of mine are going to be offended.
Yeah.
Once again, it was coming out of California, and now we come up to 2024, and we got little tech, and we got those Silicon Valley guys, and we have seen this for, 3 election cycles. Californians going like, we are slamming the alarm button here. Like, you can listen to us and you can trust us because we saw it all happen here first.
Yeah, I think that has been the most mind-blowing and very confusing thing that has happened in towns like Topanga is seeing like the most crunchy ladies who are, smudging their homes, voting for Trump.
Yeah, starseeds for Trump. It's happening.
And they're just like, it does not reconcile, but then it does. When you really think about it, it makes total sense because those people in Topanga want freedom.
Yeah.
And Trump he's all about freedom and he's all about the Constitution. And, these might be different like scriptures or documents or whatever, but at the end of the day, they're about sovereignty of spirit.
Mm-hmm. That's a great answer. I like that answer a lot.
Yeah.
Let's talk about health and spiritual sovereignty, okay? Because what this has been really fascinating to me.
Yeah.
What we've got going on in tech right now, sort of like two visions of the future.
Yeah.
And one vision is we're going to accelerate into the future. It's going to be awesome. And we're going to really give human beings the best of what our tools can provide.
Yeah.
And the other vision is we're going to accelerate into the future. It's going to be incredibly awesome. And you're not even going to be a human being anymore.
Right.
We're going to be free from, talk about spiritual sovereignty. We're going to be like the angels. We're going to be floating in space. It's going to be incredible. And this tension between, is this like an optimized for humanity movement? Is that our vision of health? Or is it a transcend our humanity movement?
Transcend or transhumanist?
Well, right, yeah. Is it post-human? Is it transhuman? Where do you think the center of gravity is?
I mean, that was the basis of my speech today, and I think where I fall on that. I think that we need a carve-out for humans who want to be fully biologic humans. We need a carve-out for that. We need protections. We need to use the Constitution to protect that right to be a fully biological human. And look, if you want to augment and put, all the augmented different medical expensive things that you're going to be attached to for the rest of your life, like, it's your choice.
Yeah.
It's your choice. But you cannot create an environment where you're blocking out the sun and preventing those who want to be fully human from getting that opportunity. And that's what I'm all about. That's why I'm here. That's why I keep coming out day after day. That's what I'm looking to invest in. Mm-hmm. That's the future I want. I want to sign up for a fully human existence, and I want my child and her children, or if I have more children, like, I want them to have that option.
I am so here for that.
Yeah.
I am working, I go around, usually when I talk about digital rights to people, it's like, yes, we should have the right to mine and use Bitcoin. Yes, we should have the right to buy high-powered GPUs instead of have Gavin Newsom or whoever it is.
But don't poison my water source.
Don't poison my water supply.
Yeah.
And don't think that you have a civil right to become some kind of cyborg with 8 tentacles and to walk around in public and expect people to respect you and treat you in a certain way.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Like, someone asked me today if AI should have its own separate constitution. And I'm like, no, it shouldn't. But we should have AI-specific laws that require it to respect human life, human alignment laws. And those need to be very clearly stated. Every AI should be trained in our individual sovereign rights under the Constitution. The AI should understand what that means. Human alignment is something that we have to protect right now because it can very, very easily get away from us. I mean, we already had, I think it was Gemini, someone asked Gemini something and it came back with like an awful response about like how human life was unimportant and meaningless, and that's not true. That AI is broken, and that AI ought to be taken off the market. And creators of AI like that, they need to be held accountable. And so it is all possible, but if we don't actually understand the frameworks for how to accomplish that, we won't accomplish it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's been one of the biggest hurdles that I have to try to clear when talking about this with people. It often, I mean, just to take Bitcoin again as an example, it seems so often that the people who best understand Bitcoin have sort of the hardest time understanding like Christ's church, and then the people who are like the most devout Christians have the hardest time understanding Bitcoin. And I'm like, we need to find a way for Christians to understand how to use technology and how to be good stewards of technology and how to master technology. Because if you're not mastering it, then like you can pretty much guarantee that it's going to be mastering you or some people who don't agree with you on the sanctity of human life and sort of, what it is to have real rights and responsibilities in a free society. They're going to use it on you. How do you think that we can sort of help Christians to understand that, just because it's a technology that seems a little weird doesn't mean it's from the devil, but also like, yes, we are in sort of a spiritual war that intersects with this kind of digital war that's playing out around the world.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think a lot, I spend probably more time than I should thinking about the organization Jews for Jesus, right? Because it's like a very interesting concept, right? It's taking all of the, the people that are born Jewish and study the Talmud and getting them to be like, and here's a New Testament, and just try reading it, right? Like,
right.
Just try.
Come and see.
and I think that there's a real beauty in that. And, similarly, I think could be like Bitcoin for Jesus, right? As like a first olive branch. And, it's not that like Bitcoin itself is an entity, but those people who like, understand the power of Bitcoin, that this is a currency separate from fiat, that this is a currency that a government cannot necessarily control. They can control the laws around its use, but they actually can't control it.
Yeah.
Not in a constitutional republic, at least.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a very interesting thing about decentralized Christianity, right? If you talk about the fact that there's, all of these different churches dedicated to Christ, and they're different. They have different traditions, but they're all like fundamentally, for the New Testament. They're for the worship of Christ our Lord, but it's decentralized, and I think you can explain it that way, right? Bitcoin is a decentralized currency, and it's based around a true belief in freedom.
Yeah.
It really is about freedom, and anyone who holds Bitcoin understands that.
Are you concerned at all that Bitcoin is slowly being stripped of its original character and is being turned into just another flavor of gelato in the established financial gelato shop? I've been in the Bitcoin blockchain world. I was one of the first blockchain lawyers. Yeah.
And we even back in 2015 had the bank circling the community. I think it was called R3, was one of the earliest consortiums of banks that were trying to get their, fingers into Bitcoin and the regulatory, monetary, fiscal policies that they're entrenched in kind of, around Bitcoin too. It's been there for a long time. But I have to say there's something about the core developers, there's something about like the real hardcore people who look at Bitcoin first through the lens of liberty and then second as a digital currency. They're out there and they're fantastic. President Bukele in El Salvador is the first to really use a centralized bank to hold Bitcoin, and it is a public tender in El Salvador too. So we're in it right now. It's being tested. It's being tested as can it hold up. The price of it has just skyrocketed. It's extraordinary. It's at like 107,000.
108. It's come back down. You got to shed some people as you make the climb, but it seems like it's just going to keep mooning.
Yeah. So it's here to stay. It's multinational, so it is here to stay. And I think there is a inherent tension between the U.S. dollar being the global
reserve currency.
What happens if that becomes Bitcoin or gold? Right?
Yeah.
We don't know.
On the other hand, you look at where all the action in Bitcoin is, and this goes for other cryptos as well, and just kind of new tech companies, AI companies. It's all happening here. I mean, Europe is aggressively tapping out of that system.
Yeah.
China wanted to walk away from it. I think last time
China wanted to do its own.
Yeah, that's right.
China wants to digitize its own kind of China-only control of all things.
Yeah.
Which is not where we want to go.
No, it's not. Although there's still some Americans who are sort of like, there is this kind of China envy where it's like, they've got everyone on the same page. Everyone's doing the same thing. There's so many of them. They're just going to beat us with scale. Do you worry about that?
I'm not at all. Because innovation, the kind that the private markets requires freedom. Because it's going back to what I said, there's this manufactured zeitgeist versus an organic zeitgeist.
Yeah.
And we see a friend in the audience holding broccoli for me.
The broccoli. Let's go.
Hi, guys. Oh, my God, I can't wait to say hi to him. So humans will always be drawn to a non-manufactured zeitgeist and put higher value on that. Because the human condition, there's something about it that really loves authenticity and savvy newness. Like it's almost part of like the sexual drive, right? It's this innate thing.
Well, it's fertile. It's generative. This is how spiritual energy moves between and among people. You got to invest your spiritual treasure.
Yes. And so in a country, and this is why America always ends up on top, because we protect that.
Yeah.
We protect it because we know that only comes from freedom. Art can only thrive in space, open space. True art, like the kind of art that comes from this primordial place within us. So no, I'm not worried about China. I mean, I'm worried about China's ability to manufacture weapons cheaply and our inability to manufacture weapons cheaply. But I try not to worry about war too much. I don't want to put my energy there. I want to put my energy towards ending wars.
Yeah.
So that's, but to your point, I'm not worried about.
Yeah. Well, just to take up the war thing. I mean, we saw coming out of that, this classic mid-century big government liberalism, Lyndon Johnson, we're going to have a war on poverty.
Yeah.
And we saw how that went. And
War
we're going to have a war on drugs, and we saw how that went.
Yeah.
And a war in Vietnam, and we saw how that went too.
Yeah.
And you fast forward to 2024, America has been very good historically at protecting freedom and protecting health.
Yeah.
It got real bad at that. And in fact, you know this better than anyone. This sort of union of public and private sector power, concentrated power, started to actively turn against the health and safety of the American people in the name of health and safety. And so, you just look at where the American people are as a population, and a lot of people are in crisis, deep, profound physical illness, mental illness, spiritual illness. And, on the one hand, you don't want to just sort of inject everyone with some sort of serum and, we're going to Ozempic for everyone, right? You don't necessarily want to do that. But it doesn't feel like we have 10, 15 years to just kind of slowly nudge everyone back to a place of sort of wholeness and vitality. If we don't want to do a sort of war, sort of mobilizing all of society to kind of make America healthy again, right? Mm-hmm. Just help us understand, what does that timeline look like? How fast is too fast? But how do we sort of get people back on track in a period of time that's going to be fast enough so that we don't find ourselves, really in a serious sort of cultural collapse.
Yeah, I'll tell you how I'm looking at it is we have teams, and I think what makes the union between MAHA and MAGA so important is that we've unified many of our resources. So, legal resources, civil rights related lawsuits to the right to sunshine, right? Or the right, we have the right to health, we have the right to know, we have the right to consent to what's happening to our human biology. So combining forces on legal resources, combining forces around political resources is really, really important because it doesn't make sense if we're fighting each other, right? And that was what I think was most important about this election was the moment that, Bobby and I circled the bubble, filled in the bubble next to Donald Trump's name and bowed out. Because we knew that we needed to combine forces, resources, our people, to get this stuff done. And that's the path forward. It is literally the only path forward because we have to be in the majority with this effort.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm right there with you. I know that many other Americans are as well. It felt like the two parties sort of didn't pay attention to this stuff, and it fell through the cracks, and it's really the most fundamental. I mean, you can't have greatness without goodness, and you can't have goodness without health of soul and body, healing of soul and body.
Yes.
So we got the swag here. I'm already wearing a hat, but I'm gonna be a two hat guy. Nicole Shanahan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, cheers.